Hello there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Changing Minds podcast. I'm Home Fitzpatrick, and today we're going to be talking about, well, hopefully I'll get to it. I'm going to be talking to you about how to deal with or how to stop procrastinating. I'll get there. There's a few things I wanted to do first, and then maybe if we have time at the end, we'll talk about procrastination. Probably you're going to pause this anyway and come back to it, right? That's my understanding is you'll listen to some other podcast first, and then eventually maybe if you've time at some point, you'll go back and stop procrastinating and take action. Isn't that always the way? What we tend to do with a lot of areas of our lives is that we tend to procrastinate way too much. And in this episode, what I want to do is share with you a little bit around why we procrastinate the way we do. But also what I want to do is talk to you a little bit more about how we can stop procrastinating. This month in the Changing Minds monthly membership, which is the membership that we have, you can find more information at owenfitzpatrick.com/monthly or changingminds.com, and you go to the monthly membership. And you'll see all the information there. We do monthly Facebook Lives. We got a lot of online courses. But one of the online courses that I'm recording live and then will be available to all our members is what I'm going to call Execution School. And I know what you're thinking. Brilliant. We finally learn a school that teaches us how to execute people, and I totally understand how valuable that is. Unfortunately, though, it's not going to be about executing people. It's about executing tasks, doing the things you need to do. And primarily, a couple of the modules in it are really overall about overcoming procrastination. So I want to sort of touch on that because it is a topic that I've spent quite a bit of time on over the years, worked with a lot of different people, helping them to overcome procrastination. It's something that myself I've had to work on in different areas over the years, and it's something that I have a lot of helpful insight and evidence-based practices and skills and techniques that can certainly help you to tackle it and conquer procrastination. And not conquer procrastination tomorrow or in the future, but conquer procrastination today. So what we're going to be looking at today is, first of all, why we procrastinate, and second of all, what are some of the things we can do to be able to overcome procrastination in our everyday lives. And please stay with us. Keep listening to this episode. Do not put it off till later, because that defeats the whole purpose. You know, there's a great book called The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. Phenomenal book. And in it, Pressfield talks about resistance as this sort of pushback that we have against the creative work that we do. So any writer will face, it's not just writer's block, but it's the desire not to write, the desire not to do the things that you need to do. And that resistance is something that we all must face, we all must tackle. And when he explores resistance, it's a fascinating look at what resistance is all about. But one thing that I suppose he does come to the conclusion of is it's something that we continuously have to fight against. If you are creating, if you're putting stuff out there into the world, if you're taking action, you're always going to be going against this resistance. And one form of this resistance is really this notion or this lust for procrastination. I say lust because oftentimes it feels like we're being tempted into procrastinating. It's not just about losing our focus, it's other factors happening. So why do we procrastinate? Why do people procrastinate in general? Well, the first reason is fear. We are held back by the fears that we have, the fears of failure, the fears of embarrassment, the fears of success sometimes, the fears of overwhelm, the fears of not getting it right, the fears of being imperfect. There's a whole host of different fears that we have, fears that trap us and prevent us from being able to take the action that we know we need to take, because we're looking at it and we're thinking to ourselves, what if I get it wrong? What if I get it right? What if this happens? What if that happens? And so it's easier for us to stay in the same position, doing the same thing, feeling the same feelings, than it is for us to, inverted commas, take a risk and actually move forward with the new action or the new tasks or in the new project. The second reason why we tend to procrastinate is as a result of lack of focus. It's hard for us to focus on one thing. There's so many competing priorities. And now we live in a world where we're bombarded with information, we're bombarded with options, bombarded with all of these different stimuluses, or stimuli. Is it stimuluses or stimuli? I think it's stimuluses. Many stimuluses. There's many stimuluses that get to us. Stimuli just sounds a little bit weird. If it is stimuli, I said stimuli. If it is stimuluses, of course I knew that. But regardless of that, we've lots of stimuli, stimuluses, see I'm doing it, that tend to grab our attention. There's the whole new shiny syndrome, and shiny new objects immediately appear more interesting to us. And this is really a quirk of the human brain, but it's very much taken advantage of by the powers that by the media, by social media, by marketing, by advertising. They know that when they create something that's shiny and new, that's going to get our attention. As a result of that, it's very difficult for us to focus. ADD, ADHD, a lot of people are obviously hijacking the term now, and any time that they can't focus, they'll use it. But ADD and ADHD, attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, are both as popular as ever. And by popular, I mean a lot of people tend to experience them and tend to be affected by them. So we have the fear of so many things. We've got the lack of focus. And then finally, because we want to stay with the F's, we have the feelings are not enough. So we don't feel enough like doing something. We don't feel like taking the action. And that's partly a lack of motivation. Sometimes it's a laziness. Sometimes just a desire to stay in our comfort zone, not out of fear per se, but just out of not wanting to be uncomfortable. And so it's vital is that we recognize these three impediments, because the fears that hold us back, the lack of focus, and the feelings that aren't enough, that aren't strong enough for us to take action, they're the very things we need to conquer if we are, in fact, to be able to overcome procrastination. So a big piece to the puzzle, a big piece to the jigsaw here is to make sure that we're motivating ourselves successfully. So we're able to motivate ourselves to take the action that we need to take in order for us to be able to get the results we want. We need to be motivated enough to take action, because oftentimes the reason that we don't take action, the reason why we are procrastinating, is because we're not sufficiently motivated. In other words, we don't feel enough motivation to take the action. So one way to be able to get us over the hump is to be able to drive down and drive ourselves and elevate the amount of motivation, or from a neurochemical point of view, trigger the release of even more dopamine that gets us to want to take action. Dopamine, of course, is the molecule of more, the molecule of motivation, the molecule of reinforcement, as I mentioned on previous podcasts. And dopamine is a chemical that's triggered in response to a number of different criteria. But what happens is it's also the molecule of action. In other words, it drives us to take action. It makes us want things, which in turn motivates us, which in turn gets us to operationalize in different projects or different procedures. So with that in mind, what are some of the ways that we need to elevate motivation in the brain? Now, the first one to look at is progress and easy wins. And this is based upon the notion of breaking down a project into smaller pieces. A lot of people are aware of this. This is something where if you ask most people, what are the top tips for procrastination? They will tell you, well, break it down into smaller pieces and it'll be easier to do. And there's lots of examples of this. There's what they call the 2-minute rule. And the 2-minute rule is if you ever need to get yourself into a habit of doing something, just do it for 2 minutes. And if you do it for 2 minutes, then it'll be something you can continue on with. Now, some people will call that the 5-minute rule and say, look, all you got to do is just do it for 5 minutes. So you want to go for a run, just run for 5 minutes. You want to take that action, you want to start cleaning, just clean for 5 minutes. Could be a 2-minute rule, could be a 1-minute rule, could be a 5-minute rule. The point is, you're giving people a very easy entry into whatever it is that you want to motivate them to do, whatever they've been procrastinating. Because part of the procrastination happens in thinking, oh my goodness, I got to do, let's say, my accounts. Oh, that will take forever. Whereas if you just say to yourself, look, I'm just going to give myself 2 minutes of doing my accounts, it's so much easier to continue doing your accounts than it is for you to do this big project for a long period of time. And it's easier for you to continue once you've started than it is for you to start this mammoth. And so with that in mind, let's look a little bit about why it works, because a lot of people talk about the fact that we need to break it down, but I want to explain a little bit more about why it works. And the primary reason it works is because from a dopamine point of view, again, dopamine is released into your brain on an ongoing basis, but whenever we're more motivated to do something, the dopamine increases in terms of its firing rate in the brain. So we get more dopamine per capita, per second, than we would do normally when we're more motivated and when we're less motivated. So with that in mind, what happens is that when you start to break things down into smaller pieces, you give yourself easier wins. And since motivation, or since dopamine is released in response to the possibility of reward, in other words, the possibility of a win, when you change your perception of the task, in other words, when you turn the task into multi-tasks, when you turn the task into milestone tasks, when you turn the task into smaller tasks, immediately now you've got more opportunities to win, more opportunities to be rewarded, and you're therefore closer to a win, which in turn elevates levels of motivation, elevates levels of dopamine and makes you much more motivated and much more likely to overcome procrastination. So that's a little bit about the neuroscience of why the proofs of progress, the breaking tasks down into smaller pieces, actually works. Motivation in general, though, is really about towards what you do want or away from what you don't. It's about pleasure, it's about pain. And so often, one of the mistakes we make is we try to always motivate ourselves with pleasure, for example. It's like, oh, I need to be motivated to do this thing with how great it will be. And we procrastinate sometimes because even though we're imagining how amazing it will be once we've done it, it's not enough to get us to take the action. And the reason is simple, because for us, in that context, that's not motivating enough, because we're more likely to be motivated by what we have to lose. We're more likely to be motivated by pain. We're more likely to be motivated by the negative things that can happen than we are about the positive things and the benefits that we can accrue as a result. So what we need to do is we need to leverage both pain and pleasure as motivators. We need to figure out, if we don't take this action, how bad will things be? And if we do take this action, how great it will be. And once you start to do that, you're now leveraging the power of motivation, both sides of motivation. And of course, we also want to look at, well, what are the individual motivations or motives for us? What are the individual drives that get us to take the action we need to? Once you recognize in what motivates you that's different to what motivates anyone else, you can start to leverage that and start to use that in order to drive you forward and get you to take the action that you need to take. So when you look at specifically the kinds of reasons why you're interested, that's also going to help you to overcome the likelihood of procrastinating in that moment. And then finally, visualization. Visualizing, imagining achieving your goal, or for that matter, imagining the pain if you don't achieve your goal, will also drive up the motivation, elevate the level of dopamine, and as a result of that, help to get you to feel the urgency to take the action. Sometimes really the cure to procrastination is urgency, and sometimes that's by giving yourself a deadline. We'll talk a little bit about that later on, but the deadline effect is creating urgency because of what will happen if you don't actually take the action that you need to. That is another part of motivating. So we have motivation as one of the tools that we need to leverage if we are to overcome procrastination. And again, breaking that task down into smaller pieces, because that rises the level of motivation and dopamine, leveraging both pain and pleasure, being specific to what you are motivated by, what your why is, and then visualizing it vividly so that you're increasing the intensity of the emotion. All of those are different ways to be able to motivate yourself. Another approach to procrastination is to use what I call the procrastination paradox. And this is the notion that procrastination oftentimes can seem like it's the absence of taking action, right? So when you say you procrastinate, you might say, well, I just haven't gotten around to it yet, or I haven't done it yet, or I haven't taken the action yet. So it's almost like you're in this sort of place where you haven't acted on whatever you've been thinking at that moment in time. What I call the procrastination paradox is that you can also look at procrastination, and in fact, I would argue it's really useful to look at procrastination itself as an action in its own right. In other words, procrastination can be seen as something you're doing. I am doing the act of procrastinating. Because when you realize you're already taking action, you're already procrastinating, then it's not so much that I'm risking taking a new action, which is oftentimes one of the fears we have. I don't want to take a risk. When you realize that I'm already taking a risk because I'm already procrastinating, you ask yourself, what are the consequences of me procrastinating, of me taking the action of procrastinating? And then you turn around and you go, what are the consequences of me taking this action that I need to do? And when you start to look at it as procrastinating as an action, as opposed to a still state that you're in before you take action, when you see it that it's an action in its own right, then the question is not whether I should take action. The question is, which action do I need to start taking? And invariably, it's so much easier for you to switch from doing one thing to doing something else than it is for you to start doing as a result. Another really useful tip to help you to be able to overcome procrastination is to stop waiting to enjoy everything. So often we need to feel right. A lot of times people say to me, oh, I need to make sure I feel like doing it, or I haven't been gripped by the feeling yet. I'm not in the mood to do it. And so often we'll put things off because we're not in the mood to do it. But the reality is, if you have to wait to be in the mood to do it, then there's so many things you're not going to do, because we rarely have A lot of the actions that we need to take in order for us to have successful lives, we rarely feel in the mood to do them. So the most important thing we need to do is to get used to doing things that are difficult, even when we don't feel like it. When you start doing the actions that you know you need to do, regardless of how you feel, that discipline, that rigor, that will allow you to be able to be more in control of your life. And one of the differences, I think, between a lot of the most successful people out there and a lot of others is that the most successful people tend to be good at doing whatever it is they need to do. They don't need to enjoy absolutely everything. And there's this myth out there that do what you feel like doing. Well, not always. A lot of times it's not about doing what you feel like doing. It's about do what you don't feel like doing because you know, ultimately speaking, it's good for you long term. And that's a really important element that you need to have in order to overcome procrastination. Just do it is another one. This is very close to, obviously, there's the Nike slogan, which is just do it, but also Mel Robbins in her book, The 5-Second Rule. We talked earlier about the 5-minute rule or the 2-minute rule. Well, Mel Robbins is the 5-second rule, which is that instead of motivating yourself, simply count from 5 down to 1. And on 1, that's when you take the action. So you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you just take the action. And her whole book's about that. I mean, the whole thing is about that one simple technique, but she gives lots of examples of how it can benefit you and how it can help you and how to use it. And it's a powerful thing. Why? Because you're kind of effectively thought stopping. You're just going, okay, I'm going to take the action in 1, and that's all there is to it. And as she said, you count down to 1 because you can always renegotiate yourself if you're counting up, going, oh, I'll do a 5. No, I'll do it at 6. Whereas, when you say I'm doing it at 1, or worst case scenario, you're doing it at 0, then that's it. You take the action there. And it's almost like that's the countdown where we lifted off the rockets. It's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then the rocket goes up into space and whatnot. So just doing it is another strategy you can use to overcome procrastination. Another element is to control the world. And by this I mean simply focusing on controlling your environment to the best of your ability. So often we put ourselves in positions where our focus is going to be hijacked. I mean, we give ourselves places, or we organize our working space in such a way that it's very easy for our minds to be hijacked. It's very easy for our focus to be taken by the myriad of potential distractions or interruptions that are likely to happen to us. And what's critical is that we give ourselves the opportunity to be able to organize our environment effectively, to be able to figure out how can I control my world such that I'm able to get a clear sense of exactly what I need to be focusing on. So it's easy for you to focus on your priorities. We also need to be aware of another technique to do with deadlines. I kind of touched on this earlier, but use deadlines and consequences. So give yourself a deadline, a time deadline, that by this time I need to have taken this action, or else what are the consequences? And really spell it out for yourself. Vividly imagine it. Bring your visualization back to the table and say, this is when I need to get it done. And if I don't get it done by this date, these are the terrible consequences that I will experience. When you start to think in terms of deadlines and consequences, you give yourself deadlines, which then drives up the urgency and is more likely to successfully motivate you to take the action as a result. Another important element is to be very clear of exactly what you're doing and what you need to do. This is something I've touched on before at different places, something I talk about when I talk about making changes occur. But certainly, in order for us to be able to successfully take the actions we need to, we really need to be better at being clear about exactly what action we need to take and exactly how we're going to take it. The more impediments, in other words, the more friction rather, between what we want to do and actually doing it, the more likely we are to hesitate. So the more steps we have to take, the more difficult it is, the more confusing it is, the more ambiguous it is, the less likely we are to actually take the action we need to. So get very, very clear of exactly what you need to do. 2 other things that I wanted to bring up. The first is, it's really vital that we take care of ourselves. We take care of our brains. We take care of what we call our body budget. And our body budget is, simply put, the way in which our brain regulates our nervous system. To do this, we need to get all the fundamentals correct. We need to sleep well. We need to eat well. We need to exercise well. We need to move well. We need to drink plenty of water. We need to look after ourselves, get out into nature. We need to spend time around people we enjoy. We need to allow ourselves to be good to ourselves, to rest regularly. the better you treat yourself, the better you're regulating your brain and therefore regulating your nervous system. And as a result of that, you're more likely to be taking the actions that you need to. Why? Because, for example, for one thing, your dopaminergic system is going to be functioning better the more nutritious your meals are, the more sleep you get, the healthier you are overall, and the healthier your brain is, the more your dopaminergic system is going to work well. So therefore, you're going to be more motivated, you're going to take better action, you're going to procrastinate less. So it's vital for us to be able to be better at doing that. So we need to be better at regulating and taking care of our body budget. And the final thing we need to do is, in order for us to avoid procrastination, is to understand sometimes the challenge with balancing telling people about what we're going to do versus not. So on the one hand, one way to overcome procrastination is to tell lots of people, I'm going to do this, so that we have to be accountable. We don't want to lose face with others, so we have to hold ourselves accountable to taking the action that we said that we were going to do. Therefore, it makes us more likely to do it. But on the flip side, some research suggests that when we do this, if we tell people we're going to write a book, for example, and we already get everyone tells us, oh, that was wonderful, that was great, and they praise how great it is, then it's almost like we can get the pleasure of the book itself from the praise of saying that we're going to do it. Therefore, saying we're going to do it feels almost as good as actually doing it. And so for that, we then will drop in terms of our motivation because we already get the kick out of telling people. So we have to be able to adapt accordingly. And what that means is we have to be able to make it so that we tell people to hold us accountable, but those people that are holding us accountable are the ones that are looking to see whether or not we're going to follow through on our plans, as opposed to people talking about how great it is and just celebrating it for us. So the purpose of telling people is not for people to talk about, oh, that's amazing, you're so great. The purpose is to get people to look at it and go, oh, I can't wait to see your progress. So they're going to check in on you like that. So I gave you oodles of different examples of overcoming procrastination. Of course, there's some benefits with procrastination as well. There's a great book called Originals by Adam Grant, where you can learn a little bit inside of that about how procrastination can help people be, for example, more creative. But if you find that procrastination is holding you back, literally, and it's stopping you from doing the things that you know would make your life better, then I'm sure you'll find a lot of the tools and techniques we talked about today will be extremely helpful. If you found this helpful, please do share it. Let people know. Tell more people about the Changing Minds podcast. Spread the word. Also, if you're interested in a weekly newsletter, I go deep on a topic and I hopefully change the way you think about some ideas and concepts. That's called the Inner Propaganda Newsletter, and you can find out more information at owenfitzpatrick.com/newsletter. And finally, to let you know if you are interested in joining me in my Changing Minds monthly membership, where every month I go live for 90 minutes on Facebook, training you in depth in a different area. You get access to more than 100 hours of content with a video search feature, with an Owen chatbot of your own that you can ask me all sorts of questions on. And if I've answered it over the hundreds of hours or 100 hours or so, then you'll be able to get those answers from me. But with all of those different things, with all those different courses, including Sleep School, Love School, Communication School, Confidence School, Habit School, whole host, and soon to be Execution School, you can join us by going to changingminds.com/monthly or owenfitzpatrick.com/monthly. Either way, would love to have you on board, would love to have you part of the membership. Would love to see you then. For now, thank you very much for tuning in. Hope you found this useful. Hope you found this helpful. And I hope that you've successfully managed to listen to this today and now not procrastinated. For now, be well, take care. Make sure you take action. Just go and just do it. Believe better. And as always, may the force be with you. Take care. Bye-bye.